So let's get started with a simple question. Tell us what you do, what is your current role, and uh, what is your kind of profile in terms of current organization. So, Ila, if you can start.
Yeah, sure. So, hi everyone. My name is Ila Jha, and I have around 15 years of IT experience. Currently, I'm working with Intera IT as senior manager. And prior to this, I've also worked with companies like Fidelity and CGI. I've done IIBA, CCBA, and CBAP certification, and I'm also a PMI Agile certified practitioner and CSPO. And as Abhishek mentioned, I've been conducting trainings, business analysis certification trainings from last 3 years. So that's a bit about myself.
Okay.
Hi folks, my name is Satish. So I have close to 11 years of experience. I started my career as a business analyst. 5 years I was with Accenture, and now for the last 6 years I am with KPMG. So my current designation is assistant manager. My typical day at work involves requirement gathering, requirement elicitation, and strategy analysis. So over the 11 years, I got opportunity to work with multiple clients, and I would call myself as a generalist because I got opportunity to work in retail banking, telecommunication, software lifecycle management, transfer pricing. And I'm CCBA and CBAP certified. Along with that, I also completed CSM, CSPO, and I'm also Prince 2 practitioner. And now I'm preparing for PMP.
Okay, great, fantastic. So, both of you, you must be taking interviews. So, what kind of interviews you have been conducting, and uh, in short, what do you expect your candidates to have if you're interviewing a business analyst? Satish, if you can start.
Yeah. So ideally, when we look for a business analyst opening, the very moment when we reach out to the HR for a single opening, we get around 10 to 15 resumes. So the first thing is that like how your resume should get shortlisted. Because if you have the same run-of-the-mill template, because what we see in all the resumes is like everybody follows the same template. Everybody copies the same content. So the first thing which you need to keep in mind is like your resume should be unique. And how it should be unique, nobody can tell you like this is the right format. If anybody is telling you this is the right format, I'm 100% sure somebody like then it is not the right way, because then folks will copy the same template. So first thing, if your resume needs to get shortlisted for any interview, and to be candid, I'll tell you, any BA opening, if you go and check in LinkedIn, you can see minimum 2,000 or 3,000 applicants for a single BA opening. So first thing, your resume should be unique. Second thing, your resume should be, there are so many folks who are making use of infographics and other stuff. But most of the organizations, they use this ATS software. So that will not, if you use any graphics in your resume, it will not be readable by those software. So ensure your resume is ATS friendly. And now coming back to the main topic, what we look in my organizations when we are looking for business analysts, the first thing is your attitude, your personality. So that is what we primarily look at, and then we also look at your communication skills and your business knowledge skills. Over to Ella.
Right. Thanks, Satish. Ila.
Yeah. So like Satish mentioned, that first level of screening, it happens at the resume level itself, because we get a lot of resumes for a single opening. So important thing here is to have the relevant keywords on your resume so that it gets shortlisted. The most important thing that we look for is your skills, knowledge, and competencies. And to prove those areas, we look for your work experience and education. So have those keywords, and if you have any certification related certifications, that's an added advantage. In addition to this, we also look for some personality traits which are suited for business analysis profile. For example, your communication skills, negotiation skills, your values, and some of the other things that we look for is how well you have articulated the content in your resume. Sometimes I get 5 to 6 pages long resume, and it becomes so, it takes a lot of effort to filter out the relevant information. So we are not very much interested in the lengthy project description, but more on the roles and responsibilities that you have performed, right? So your content should be concise, and we also look for if there are any grammatical errors and spelling errors. Then in that case, we tend to think that the person is not really serious. And also, if you have a profile where you have mentioned, I've worked for this organization for 3 months, then another organization for 8 months, then again we tend to doubt that whether the candidate will be loyal to our organization or not. So avoid these kind of things, and highlight. And also, it's very important that you cannot have a same resume for all the different openings. So make sure you go through the company profile, what are their values, what are their mission and vision statements, and the particular job description, and include those relevant keywords, demonstrate those skills through your resume.
Right, right, right. So one of the follow-up questions I have seen in many resumes, people having, this is my vision, this is my life goal. How important and relevant are those?
I mean, I would say that was in 1980s, 1990s, we used to have this objective or like what you want to accomplish, those all things. But in 2020, nobody's interested in knowing nobody's interested in knowing about like what is our vision, mission, those objectives. Those all things are like, I would say, they occupy some space in our profile, which is of maybe we could better put it in. Maybe if you have achieved something in your project, instead of like projecting or like telling in that like I want to become like this, rather we can reflect back on our history and we can highlight those points. So those points will get brownie points rather than saying that like I'll become a SME in this particular domain and everything. None of the, even nowadays, still there are few resumes, Abhishek, I've seen few resumes having all of that, but those all things are like a strict no-no. And as Ella mentioned, it is not the quantity that matters, but the quality of the resume. Like if a 1 page or 2 page resume, if you can compress the information, well and good. I mean, and ideally I'll tell you, a test statement for any BA is the documentation skills. And how can we check your documentation skills, your business, your resume, your documentation? So how you have represented that all those information in those 2 pages, that itself will tell us like whether you're a good business analyst or you want to be a business analyst or you're trying to be a business analyst.
Correct. Very true. And one more question related to this: how important it is, or how relevant it is, to put a summary of your entire professional experience at the top of your resume, maybe 3-4 lines or 5 lines. Does it make sense to have it there?
Yeah, I think in my view, it is a great way to highlight your skills, competencies, your professional experience. So rather than going through the entire resume and then figuring it out myself, if it is there, it kind of helps.
Right.
I think the key point here would be to, again, tailor it as per the organization that you are applying for and the job description, and highlight the things that the opening demands for. That would be great.
And Abhishek, just to add, I'll tell you hardly 5 seconds. So if I get 15 resumes in from the HR department for a BA opening, I'll just open that PDF and I'll just skim through. Hardly 5 seconds is what I devote for any of the resume. And I'll just look for the summary in the first page. So if there is any summary, I'll get to know like whether I should shortlist that profile. If I'm not getting to see any summary, maybe I'll skim down to the second page. And if I'm not happy with the template or like not happy with the format, I mean, no matter even if he's certified or something, I'm not going to shortlist him. So it's not only in my organization, in all those organizations, hardly 5-10 seconds. So you will have to create that impression through your resume itself.
Correct, correct. Absolutely great point. So what we are talking about here is try and show the employer what you want to show as a summary of your professional experience. Keep your resume short. Don't try to write the stories in 5 pages or 6 pages. That's not going to help you. And try to present information which is relevant to an organization and maybe to a position as well. Right? These are just key points which I can take away from your answers which your people have given. All right. So moving on. So let's say you have received the resumes and you have shortlisted a few of them. Now HR has scheduled the interview and the candidate is now coming to you. So you are sitting in a room and the candidate walks in. Do you see anything? Do you really notice things which you'd like to? So I leave it to you to answer. So Ila, if you can start, what do you notice and what candidate should do or not do?
Right. Okay. So here, everything gets noticed about the candidate. The way a person conducts herself or himself, even in the waiting lobby, the body language, because body language, it conveys a lot of information about the candidate. How confident the person is or how nervous the person is, right? So the way the person is sitting, whether he's stooping or whether he has open body language, and the way he walks to the area where the interview is going to be conducted, everything gets noticed.
Right.
Sometimes the way a person walks in, we decide on that basis also. It gives an kind of impression about the person.
Correct. 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 Satish, you'd like to add anything here?
I'll completely agree with Elijah, because, like as they say, the first impression is the best impression. So I know we are not giving the advantage for the introverts, but a BA cannot be an introvert. A business analysis profession is like, if you look at all the traits, only the extrovert will be able to shine in this career. So if you say that like I'm an introvert, then to be honest, business analysis is not your career option. You will have to take up development or testing. So the way, in my organization, what we notice is whether his presentation skills. It all starts with the handshake. If he is like giving a mild handshake, yeah, we do understand. Maybe the first 10 minutes of the interview, they'll be quite anxious or they will be like quite reserved. But once we finish off the ice-breaking session, we give them that opportunity for them to break out come out from that. Or shed all their inhibitions and express themselves. So we give them some time, so maybe cooling off time, 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And even after 15 minutes, if we notice that like they are still reserved, they are not opening up, or they are playing safe, so in that case, we may not consider that candidate. But at the same time, if somebody is like cheerful, optimistic, or there are some folks who, even if they don't know the answer, they will admit it with an open smile, and they will be curious to understand. Like they will ask us like what, or they will at least make an effort to understand where they went wrong. So we do appreciate all these traits. So somebody who is cheerful, optimistic, and that is what, as a business analyst, right? A business analyst has to be a catalyst in the project team, because developers will be concentrating on the code and testers will be trying to find out bugs. The only person who has to ensure that like the bonding between both developers and testers will be the business analyst. So we believe that like, and even if you look at WebOff, there is a special chapter on competencies which talks about all the soft skills that a business analyst should have. So we emphasize more on the soft skills, and that is like a primary criteria which we look. If there are 4 candidates, and if all the 4 candidates are good in technical, all the 4 candidates are good in domain. So if we have to distinguish which business analyst should we prefer, the first preference we give it for the soft skills, like who has the better communication skills, who has the better negotiation skills. So those all things we keep it as a criteria, and we hand over the offer letter to only those candidates.
So one related question. So body language and confidence, all of that is important. But all of us, we are not professionals in terms of faking body language or creating or exuding that kind of confidence always. Everybody is nervous. It's a common trait for individuals. Now, what do we do? So I'm nervous. For example, I used to be nervous for any interview to start. Now, what do I do? How should I prepare myself so that at least I don't show my nervousness? Even if I am, I don't show it. So kind of I fake it really. So or I prepare for it. So what is the way in which we can prepare? Hila, if you can start with.
Right. So that's a very good question, Abhishek. In fact, all of us are nervous to an extent, but still, it's all about the way we conduct in the pressure situation, like interview. So one of the things that can make you confident is, to be well prepared. Practice like the initial questions, tell me about yourself and all, so you can really practice well. initially the questions would be from your resume. Most of the questions would be from your resume. So if you can practice well, maybe practice with your family or friends, or maybe in front of the mirror. So that will really help you. And if you know what is open body language, and consciously if you try to apply that, then I think that will help.
Right, right. Satish, would you like to add anything here?
Concur with Ella's view. You will have to do that mirror practice, and even those folks with the 10, 20 or 15 years of experience, even I have seen those folks doing mirror practice before they give wonderful presentations. Even CEOs, C-level executives, they do this secretly, and that's the, I mean, I believe that is the secret sauce behind all those presentations. So yes, it will be tough initially, because even I get those jitters when I go for interviews. I openly admit. But how do I overcome it? It's like I do this mirror practice wherein I rehearse all the questions that can come out of my profile, because first 15 minutes of the interview, the questions will come from your profile only. So if you know your profile and if you can rehearse what kind of questions they ask, and if you are like prepared for it, I would not say don't write ready-made answers for it. So if you write ready-made answers, automatically your subconscious mind, the subconscious mind will be like prepared, and the other person, the interviewer, can easily find out that like it is a rehearsed answer. So rather just think like if he's asking me about that, if there is any gap in your work episode. So if he's asking about gap, what should I tell? And if I'm telling this answer, if he's asking on that, like, so do that cost effect analysis. So more you do this analysis, to an extent, I would tell you, you will have that power to hustle. So it's all about hustling, and clearing any interview, you should know how to hustle. And there is nothing wrong in hustling. I mean, you're not faking or this and everything, because that is like an accepted practice across organizations. Because everybody knows that like nobody can be 10 out of 10. So even if you strive to reach that 7, 8 or 9 out of 10, they are happy, because they know that like even if you're put into that situation, you know how to survive. So that is what we interviewers look. So we don't bother that like if you have that experience or not. But if we believe that like if put into that situation, you will learn that and you will be able to overcome that situation. That is something which we look at for any candidate.
Correct. Right.
So I would like to add here to what Satish said, that the more you know, the more confident you will be. So if you can research about the organization, how interviews are conducted in that particular organization. For example, I went for an interview, and before that, I had some LinkedIn connections whom I really didn't know. But then I checked with them how BA interviews are conducted in your organization. And they could tell me that, okay, first round is a written round, then you get a case study. So accordingly, then I searched for those elements, and I was well prepared. I knew the different stages that are going to happen. So the more you know, the better you are prepared, the more confident you will be.
Correct.
Less surprises you will have.
Correct. So two things. One is the knowledge, which is important. So you need to be well prepared. Two, in terms of practice, if people say that you speak the same lie 100 times, it starts sounding like a truth. So the key here is that if you practice and keep on speaking the way you have prepared your answers multiple times, it will start coming out from you as natural as it possible. So maybe practicing in front of the mirror, practicing with somebody senior, mock kind of situation. And in fact, you can also use your mobile to record your answer and listen to it. It's very simple to use a mobile phone to record and listen to it. Great. So now moving on. So the person has now walked into the room and has sat. So now we start with some icebreaker questions. That's a general practice. So we start questions like, tell me about yourself, what do you bring to the table, or why should I select? Okay. So let's start with two typical questions here. First one is, tell me about yourself. So Satish, if you can answer that question.
Yeah, so that is like a typical interview question. No matter at what level you go, the first question is like, tell me about yourself. So let me tell you two golden rules. The first golden rule is, don't repeat what is there in your resume, because during that 10 seconds the interviewer will be going through your resume. So don't repeat what is there in your resume, because that is not going to create an impression. So if your intention is to create an impression, talk about yourself, talk about like the things which are not there in your resume. Maybe you can give a 1 or 2 sentences about like, I have these many years of experience, I have worked in these moments. Then talk about your unique traits, or like whatever is not there in the resume, come up with 3 or 4 sentences. I mean, you should not go overboard, so that like because the first, they say, right, first impression is the best impression. Maybe 4 or 5 sentences. Maybe first sentence with a generic introduction, and other 3 sentences around your profile, your positives. Or in that, like in the conclusion part is very important, because when you conclude, it should be with a happy note, or it should be in a positive note, because based on the conclusion, the next question can be. So it's up to you, like what you talk. Only from that, the interviewer will catch something and he will ask you the question. So if you end your introduction with some USP of yours, you may have some unique skill, right? Maybe you may be good in critical thinking, or you may be good in negotiation skills, or you may have a good presentation skills. Add this at the end of your introduction and be prepared. I mean, the first question will be related to that, because whenever you, because that interviewer would have done 100 interviews, and every person is like giving the same introduction. I did this, I did that, and that all things are there in the resume. When you walk the road which is less traveled, in that way you've got his attention, and now he's curious to know more about you. So you would have told like, this is one of your crucial skills, project management. Now he was curious to know, okay, you said you're good in project management, can you tell me one instance wherein you demonstrated that skill? So once that question comes, you have to be prepared, and you will have to then tell him like what was the project. So in that case, you're taking the complete control from the interviewer to yourself. So it's not, the interviewer is not leading the discussion. You're leading the discussion, wherein you're giving him the points, and from that he's asking you. So that is one inherent advantage, which all starts from tell me about yourself. Because in the middle of the interview, you will not get the control. Only in the tell me about yourself, when you walk the road less traveled, you get that control.
Basically, you can redirect the interviewer to the direction possibly which you want the interviewer to go. Another thing which I would share is that I've also interviewed many people, and one of the things which really put me off was when people start saying, I was born and brought up at this place. I'm really not bothered, because that's not my outlook at all. I'm looking at what you bring to us, why we should consider you, which is precisely the next question to Ila, is that the question which is, what do you bring to the table, or why should we select? So how should one answer that question?
Right. Okay. So here the important thing to keep in mind is this is not a generic question. This is a specific question, because when you are appearing for an interview for an organization, every organization, they have certain type of person in their mind when it comes to the position they are interviewing for. So again, like I mentioned before, tailor your answer. Really do your research on the company, visit their website, their LinkedIn page, their YouTube videos, so that you get hold of the mission and vision of the organization, the values that the organization believes in. Be thorough with the job description and use those elements while answering why should we select you. And like Satish mentioned, it is important that you bring something unique. What is it that you have that others don't have? Maybe you really are an outgoing person, you really enjoy communications, you have a very good exposure on agile, or you have some good technical background which will help you in the position. So something you should reflect upon yourself. What is that unique value proposition that you can bring? The other thing that I would like to point out is if you can quantify your achievements rather than making it vague. So that will help you. What value you have provided in your roles on the practical experience level. And because this question, tell me about yourself and why should we select you, this is the most common question which is asked in every interview. So here you should be well prepared with a pitch and you should practice that well, because here what we look for is your confidence. So here if you fumble or stutter or make some mistakes, then that doesn't make a good impression.
Correct. All right. So now, getting the icebreaker questions out of the way, now let's move on to the core part of the interview. So from the icebreaker questions, generally it moves to the more core skills oriented questions. So let's try and focus on business analyst core skills. And nowadays, situational questions are pretty common. So what I'll do is I'll put you on some spot and I'll ask you questions, and you have to answer posing as the interviewee, and I'm the interviewer. Okay. So let me ask you a couple of questions. So Ila, I'll start with you. So the first question is, tell us about the requirements gathering process. How do you go about gathering the requirements with the stakeholders?
So requirement gathering process, it has got multiple steps involved in it. And again, we should tailor it based on our experience. For example, whenever we go for requirements gathering, before that, a lot of background information is collected, a lot of research is done about the organization, about the project, like whether it is a new project or is it an existing project, what all system does it integrate with, the domain of the project. So that project history, as much information as you can collect, that really helps in also assessing any risks with the project. So gather the background information. Try to identify all the stakeholders. Who are the people who are getting impacted by this change? Who are the decision makers? Because these are the people who will approve your changes. So identify all the stakeholders who are going to be involved. Discover the business objectives. That becomes very important. Why are we starting this project? What is the business goal of this project? That really helps you to scope the requirements and also be focused on the vision of it. Based on this, you can define the scope, right? And then maybe you can go ahead with the actual requirement gathering process, where there are multiple ways. Most common way would be to interviewing your stakeholders, conducting workshops, document analysis. So based on all the information, the scope, you conduct your requirements process, you create the documents, and then maybe based on that you can evaluate the different options, whether we should develop the project from the scratch, or whether we should go for some existing options in the market, or some customized solution, or maybe integrating with some third party. So that is the typical way we do the requirements gathering. But again, it depends on the project. It varies from project to project, but in general, this is the process that we follow.
Okay. Next question I have to read because it's a situational question. So let me read it from the text. So there's a card company which is facing declining profits for the past 3 quarters. What would you do to help understand what is the problem? Because CEO has hired you, so you need to figure out what's the issue. Now, these kind of questions are typically asked to put you in a spot. That's the primary purpose of situational questions. You may not be right in terms of the best answer, but what interviewer is looking at here is to figure out, can you approach this question in a right way or right frame of mind. So how should somebody answer this question, which is more to do with solving a problem?
Correct. So like you mentioned correctly, that here basically the interviewer wants to know, how do you analyze or solve a business problem? And there's no correct answer or no best answer. So why the profits are declining over the last 3 quarters. So for this, maybe you should look at what are the drivers for profit, right? So one driver would be revenue, the other driver would be cost. And then list out the different factors within revenue, like maybe how many customers do they have, the annual fees which is charged to the customer. So all those revenue drivers you should try to list out, and also try to list out the cost drivers. There would be some fixed costs associated, there would be some variable costs. So once you list out all those drivers, then maybe you can check with the interviewer that which of the factor do you think is increasing or declining over the last 3 quarters, right? And then accordingly you can have a hypothesis why the profits are declining. So here basically the interviewer is checking the approach that you are taking, and if you can list out the various steps, then that would be great.
Correct. And of course, I mean, in this case also, you may not have the right figures with you. So important thing is to understand, somebody is asking you the profits are declining, as Ila mentioned rightly, is that it could be because either the cost is increasing, your revenue is decreasing, or there's some external one-time or additional costs which have come up because of some reason. Advertising cost has gone up. So there could be various reasons. The idea here is to explain that profits depend on certain factors. We need to analyze those factors to come up with the reasons as to why this is declined, right? That's what possibly needs to be answered. Figures might not be correct in any ways. We don't have the figures. All right. So now 2 more questions that will go to Satish. So first question: have you handled any difficult stakeholder? If yes, what did you do? How do you manage? So obviously, this is a very wide question. There could be a variety of issues with the stakeholders. You can possibly give one example.
So for this question, I would say that I was working in the RPA project, and in the RPA project, as you all know, it is about automation. So my job was to sit with the tax folks, and those folks, they are doing the manual job wherein they will copy the value from one PDF and they will enter it in a portal, and they will reconcile the data. So day in and day out, that is their work. So the organization wanted me to automate that entire process end to end. So my job was to first understand that workflow, because there are some 3 or 4 places wherein they have to copy the data, and there were around 2-3 workflow setups. So when I sat with those folks earlier, they understood the reason that I'm an IT guy, and that too IT business analyst. They understood the reason why I'm learning their processes. They are also clever, right? They understood that if somebody is doing a process study, that means they're going to do automation. So when and I was doing more of observation. So as you all know, observation is an elicitation technique, wherein I used to sit behind their desk and I used to note down what are all the values they are copying and what is the workflow. And these were not captured in any of the documents. So these folks were they were day in and day out, they were doing the process, and it was not at all documented because nobody bothered to document. So my job was to first do the documentation and then find out the feasibility for the automation. So day one, when I sat with them, they didn't even tell me. They were clicking on random buttons. They were confusing me. They were not giving me any information. Day 2, the same thing happened. And day 3, I sensed what was happening. It's because their resistance towards that, they know that automation is going to kick in, and they were completely not supportive. And I had 2 ways before me. Either I can escalate to the sponsor, and things will go out of control, wherein it would result in an escalation, and then rather in a very polite way, then it would be they will be forced to convey or tell me all the information. Or that is one of the steps. Or the second step which I can do is rely on my experience dealing with all these stakeholders. So what I did in that project is that I understood this is a problem. I got a feel that they are quite worried about their job loss. So first I made it clear that this is just a feasibility study, and I told them feasibility study doesn't mean that not all the manual work can be automated. Only things that are 90% manual work can get automated, and I told them the process. And I told them like you, I'm also an employee, and this is just like how you guys are doing the work. I'm also interested to complete this work. So first I have to break their ice. So they saw me as an outsider. So I first broke that ice, and wherein I told them like you, I'm also an employee in this company. So that worked to an extent. And then I clearly removed all their fears about this getting automated. I clearly told them, even if this gets automated also, their job safety is not going to, because they are the process SMEs. And I told them clearly about like what is subject matter expert and what are the things which they can give us. And I told them like you can be also a client and you can give us the requirements. So I did a little power of empowering from my end, and without getting any escalations, I solved it. Day 4 or day 5, I got into their good books and they gave me the complete overview about the project, like where to click, like where do we store and everything. So not only, I mean, this is just one example. There are multiple examples during requirement elicitations, during the priority. One particular team will say, we are not okay with this. We want our features to get implemented first. Or maybe there will be attitude and ego issues between the C-level executives. The CXO will say this requirement is important. CEO will say, no, this requirement is important. So at that time, and if you are not listening to them, automatically they will think that like you are having some bias. So a lot of ego issues. I mean, ideally, if you are a part of the elicitation workshop meetings, some team will believe that like you are like biased towards the finance team. But if you look at the business goals, most of the requirements are like related to finance. So obviously you will prioritize those requirements in the backlog. So a lot of cases wherein you will have to, like, few of the stakeholders will not respond to your emails, few of the stakeholders will not turn up for the meetings. So as a business analyst, there is no, I will not say that like this is the holy grail method. Like if for this problem, this is the holy grail, because each situation and each stakeholder is different, because stakeholder is a human. And we never know like what there may be, like you may have the attitude issues, you may will not. Most of the stakeholders, they don't know what is their role in the entire project. So as a business analyst, it is a job to tell them like where do they fit in the overall grand scheme of things. So once they know that like competition immensely matters for the project, then those guys will show interest. If you are not telling them like what is their role in the project, these guys will show little interest. Obviously, nobody has time to attend a 1-hour requirement meeting every week, right? So once you tell them clearly like this is the role of IT infrastructure support in this overall project, and once you empower them to attend those meetings, then we will not have any problem with the stakeholders. So I just cited 2-3 examples, but based on your project episodes, you will, there will be multiple, every day during the Agile, there will be some issues with the stakeholders. So you can give a number of examples. So in the interview, when you give these kind of examples, how you solved it, if you add that, that would be a plus.
Yeah, in fact, this is such an important thing, because as a business analyst, we have to interact with stakeholders. There's absolutely no alternative to it. So in fact, we are going to conduct an webinar in December 2nd week on the same topic. So again, 2 senior business analysts are coming who are going to discuss with me about how to handle stakeholders effectively. So some strategies, some further analysis of what makes the relationship between business analysts and stakeholders work. So whether you are a project manager, in fact, even my career as a project manager, the same principle applies. It's nothing different. So that is just the contextual part. Okay. So now to the next question. So change, as the people say, is constant in life. So is true with the projects. So if there are too many changes, how do you handle frequent changes or too many changes in a project?
Yeah. So earlier in waterfall, if there is any change, that was the most dreaded word, because if there is any, because we baseline those requirements and then we start development and then we do the functional testing, integration testing, and if there is any change in the requirement, it goes through change control board, change request. But nowadays, I don't think none of the organizations are following waterfall, because now everybody is embracing the agile projects. Even in agile project, the problem is like in sprint 1, the product owner would have said, let's focus on the login module. And then automatically, once you start sprint 1, and you would have like added all those product backlog items of login as high priority. And in the middle of the sprint, or maybe based on the business decision, he comes back and says that like, no, don't work on the login module. The priorities have changed. Work on the payment module. At that point of time, you wouldn't have added all those acceptance criteria, or you wouldn't have added any of the information. So in that case, you will have to stay back and you will have to provide that information, because next day onwards, the team will ask you like, where is the backlog? So first and foremost, our mindset should be like, no matter, even if we get 100 approvals that like this is the final list, still we need to have that 1% mindset that like anytime this can change. So what is my backup plan? So always keep your backlog ready, and always keep an eye out for the product owner will give you a clue. Whenever a product owner is discussing a product backlog item or a user story, if there is any assumption or if there is anything like he's not sure, but he's like pretending that like this can go well or something, try to red mark or like put a red flag on all those items, because 99% there is a probability that like something will change in that particular requirement. Whenever, so as a business analyst, my recommendation is whenever you talk to the stakeholders, and whenever they're giving you the requirement, and when you sense that like that requirement is not 100% complete, or that requirement is on a premise wherein he has some underlying assumptions, you will have to watch out for those things, and you will have to put a red mark, because this is for your purpose, because the stakeholder will say, yeah, this is final, go and work it. But 2-3 days before, after, he will come back and say, no, change it. So when as a good business analyst, consider it as a practice. Whenever you put all those requirements in a sheet, identify with some attribute saying that like this has some assumption, and write down the assumption. So after 2-3 days, if there is any change, it's not that like you're not caught off the guard. You're already prepared. You know this is going to come back and hit you. So instead of reacting to the situation, as a good business analyst, you have to respond to the situation.
So, assumptions are very important, as you rightly pointed out. All right. So we kind of come to the last question, which basically is logical. Is that so? We have gone through the entire cycle of different stages in the interview. How do you close? So your interview is over. Now you have to go out of the room. So do you thank the interviewer? Do you say goodbye? What do you do?
Yeah, so ideally, the last 15 minutes of the interview is very important. So once the interview is done with, ideally for all the interviews, all the interviewers will have some set of 4 to 5 questions. So that is like a generic questions which we ask all the candidates. And once it is done, maybe few questions from your profile or from whatever you said, maybe we'll ask few questions on it. And once we are done, you will have to, as an interviewee, you need to set the tone. So that discussion, it has to end in a happy note. And how you do it? Just reflect back. Any of the questions you are not sure, you get that opportunity to ask the interviewer. Like for instance, you don't know about RASI matrix, or you don't know about the fishbone diagram. So you just inquire that like, I missed answering that question. Can you please tell me? Like, try to show that curiosity to understand those areas wherein you are not able to answer. That will be well appreciated, because there are many folks who pretend to know everything, and that is like logically impossible. Not everyone will know all the information, right? So don't pretend that you know everything. It's okay to accept that you don't know something, and whatever you told them clearly that you don't know about it, at the end of the interview, make effort to understand from that. But they will not be in a time, because they also have some time, right? Hardly we block 30 minutes for an interview session. So you will have to be careful. They may not provide you the complete information, maybe to an extent. Then, as Ella clearly pointed out, you should have done some research about the company. Just like that, you come for a BA opening and you are asking him about like, can I know more about this role? Can I know more about this company? Those all things are like a clear red flag for us that like you have not done a research. So if you are going for a Big Four company, you know that Big Four operation is audit, tax, and advisory. So you should know what is audit, tax, and advisory. You should have done the research as a business analyst. That is your your bread and butter skill. Doing research is like that's what makes you a business analyst. So you should have done like an audit. How is IT related? So you could ask him some interesting question on that particular thing, instead of asking him some generic question like how is IT related to audit. Rather, you could have gone to the website and researched about some particular IT application in that company, and you could have asked, I did some research, this is the project, I'm curious to know about it. Every organization will have a product. If you go for Infosys have a product called Finacle, TCS have a product called iBanks, Accenture has their own internal products. So those all things you would have done the research. Try to make that 5 minutes. Try to create that impression wherein you have done the research and you're curious to know about that company. That will be well appreciated by all the interviewers because you have done some research about that company. And if you have done the research about some particular project, and if the interviewer is also working in the same project, he'll be like giving you more information about that particular project. And that's please underline the word only if you are lucky to do your research and stumbling upon that project, or through hearsay, or through your referral, or through your company, or through your friends who are working in the same organization. If you get some information about that project, everything you can talk during that interview, that will give you some brownie. And you cannot. There are some folks who are like asking for the feedback. That is like a strict no because see, then whenever you ask back to me after some 30 minutes of interview, I'm not going to straight away tell you that like you're rejected and all, right? I will reserve all this decision. I'll communicate to my managers. So don't ask for that feedback because this is not all the interviews. We don't do interviews just for giving you the feedback. And don't ask like, oh, what's my feedback? Can you give me the feedback of my performance? Don't ever ask those kind of questions because that is not a round. We are not doing something that like just to check your round and giving you a score of 1 to 5, 4 to 5 or something, nothing like that. We are trying to check whether you are the right candidate for that role. Sometimes we may feel that like you are over talented or you may be talented and it would not be a justice to put you into this role. So we cannot tell you all of it. We cannot give you other feedback. It is the role of the HR to give the feedback. So avoid all those questions asking about the feedback. Try to create good impression. Just like Ella mentioned, do some research about the company. Because the way how you start, tell me about yourself, and way how you end the interview, it matters.
Right. So Ella, what is your take on it?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Satish has mentioned. Most of the times, the ending question would be if you have some questions for us, right? And many a times candidates do not ask any question, or many a times they ask a question which is vague. Or so at that time, your ability to ask interesting questions or intelligent questions, striking a conversation with the interviewer, that will really help you. So I think you can really prepare well and ask those intelligent questions. It really shows your genuine interest in the organization and position, and that you are invested.
All right. So thank you, Satish and Ella. So the questions are over. So that I think concludes all the questions. I will thank everyone. Satish and Ella, thank you so much for this wonderful interview. And thanks all of you for participating here.